Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's briefing. I hope you are all well. Merci d'assister à la séance d'information aujourd'hui. J'espère que vous allez bien. Je m'appelle Robin Hocko et j'occupe le poste de superviseur de l'équipe de relations avec les médias au Centre de la sécurité des télécommunications. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais prendre un moment pour reconnaître que nous nous trouvons sur le territoire traditionnel non cédé du peuple Algonquin-Anishinaabe. Je suis extrêmement reconnaissant d'avoir le privilège d'habiter, de travailler et d'apprendre sur ces terres. Today we have Caroline Xavier, Chief of the Communications Security Establishment, Sammy Curry, Head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, and Rajiv Gupta, the Associate Head for the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. The Chief will provide a short opening remarks, and then she, Sammy, and Rajiv will take your questions. Nous sommes conscients que vous avez beaucoup de questions sur divers enjeux, mais nous vous demandons de vous en tenir au sujet que décrira la chef. And I would like to now invite the Chief to provide her opening remarks.
Bonjour, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Je m'appelle Caroline Xavier et mon pronom est elle. Je suis la chef du CST, le Centre de la sécurité des télécommunications. CSC includes the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, also known as the Cyber Centre, whose threat assessment team produced this report. This is our fourth edition of Cyber Threats to Canada's Democratic Process. The last update was in July 2021. Depuis 2 ans et demi, nous avons observé 4 grandes tendances qui touchent les processus démocratiques partout dans le monde, y compris ceux du Canada. I'll give a brief outline of those 4 trends and then move on to the implications for Canada. We will take about 10 minutes and then we'll open it up for questions. And as mentioned, I am joined by Sammy Curry, head of the Cyber Centre, and associate head Rajiv Gupta. First, let me clarify quickly what this report is not about. We are not talking about online disinformation in general. If we were, the number of elections targeted would be 100%. Online disinformation has become ubiquitous. It occurred in every single national election we looked at, 146 out of 146. Our data sets only include online influence activities that involve some kind of hacking element or that make use of artificial intelligence. So things like hack-a-leak operations, deepfake videos, posting disinformation on a politician's social media account. This information spread by human beings is out of scope. Troll farms staffed by humans is out of scope, unless they used AI to amplify disinformation. In-person foreign interference is out of scope. So now that we're clear on the focus, let's get down to the 4 trends. Trend number 1, targeting of democratic processes has increased. Cyber threat activity targeting elections is on the rise worldwide. Over a quarter of national elections were affected in 2022. The exact figure is 26%, up from 23% the year before. Les activités de cybermenaces ciblant les processus démocratiques dans le monde visent plus souvent à influencer l'électorat qu'à s'attaquer aux infrastructures électorales. In 2022, cyber incidents geared towards influencing voters, such as hack and leak operations, were 7 times more common than cyber incidents aimed at compromising the vote process itself. Trend number 2, Russia and China continue to conduct most of the attributed cyber threat activity targeting foreign elections. Only 2 countries have been identified as being behind cyber threat activity targeting another country's national elections in 2022. Those 2 countries are Russia and China. In 2022, we found that 9% of cyber threat activity targeting foreign elections was attributed to Russia and 6% to China. That leaves 85% unaccounted for, which brings me to trend number 3. The majority of cyber threat activity targeting elections is unattributed. Foreign adversaries are getting better at hiding their identities. They increasingly outsource their activities to avoid attribution. Examples include using non-state cyber threat groups to conduct distributed denial of service attacks, also known as DDoS attacks, or hiring commercial firms to conduct online influence operations. Au fur et à mesure que cette tendance se poursuit, il sera de plus en plus difficile pour les gouvernements d'associer les activités de cybermenaces à leur origine. Trend number 4. Generative AI is increasingly being used to influence elections. Foreign adversaries are increasingly using artificial intelligence to create disinformation, to spread disinformation, and to amplify disinformation. AI-generated deepfakes can create a video of something that never happened and put words into politicians' mouth that they never said. Social botnets enhanced by AI can artificially amplify disinformation that's already out there to fan the flames of political discord and push people to more extreme positions. Étant donné que ces technologies deviendront plus facilement accessibles, les campagnes d'influence en ligne qui utilisent l'intelligence artificielle deviendront plus répandues, plus efficaces et plus difficiles à détecter. So what are the implications for Canada? Canada is not immune to any of these global trends. I have to say that when we hear from folks outside of our professional world, they have a hard time believing that anyone would want to target us. Les gens sont souvent surpris à l'idée que des adversaires étrangers s'intéressent à nous ou qu'ils s'associent même de nos politiques nationales. But I can tell you that is very much the case. And we are doing our best to make sure Canadians know this, because you are far more likely to fall victim to it if you're not aware of it. So to be clear, we assess the cyber threat activity is more likely to happen during Canada's next federal election than it was in the past. Canada remains, however, a lower priority target than some of its allies like the US and the UK. However, deepfakes and foreign influence campaigns aimed at the US voters will likely impact Canadians by association. Foreign adversaries are likely to use generative AI to try to influence Canadian voters over the next 2 years. And if you add in hacktivists, the assessment becomes very likely. Increased tensions between Canada and a hostile state in the run-up to the federal election would likely lead to cyber threat activity, including online influence campaigns. Finally, because cyber threat actors are getting better at covering their tracks, it will become increasingly difficult for Canada to attribute any cyber threat activity that does occur in relation to our democratic process. So what are we doing about it? I will have to admit that this sounds very bleak, but let me end on a more positive note. Yes, it's true that adversaries are seeking to manipulate our democratic processes, but that doesn't mean that we are powerless to stop them. As a member of the SITE Task Force, the Security and Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force, it is our role to monitor foreign signals intelligence and Government of Canada IT networks for signs of foreign interference in our elections. In the event of a cyber attack on Canada's election infrastructure, CSE has the capabilities and the legal authorities to conduct defensive cyber operations. This means taking action online to disrupt cyber threat activity at the source. The Cyber Center works closely with Elections Canada and the provincial and territorial election authorities to make sure that they are aware of the threats and have the appropriate mitigations in place to offset them. During the federal election period, we provide a 24-hour cybersecurity hotline for candidates. We also offer cybersecurity briefings to all the federal political parties and have issued guidance for candidates and campaign teams. Canadian voters can find a wealth of resources on our website, including tips on how to identify disinformation. The address is cyber.gc.ca. The resources are found there, and they're also listed on the last page of this report. The Government of Canada also has a webpage about online disinformation, with links to fact-checking tools from organizations like Media Smarts, Snopes. Just type online disinformation into the search box anywhere on the canada.gc.ca site, and you will find it. Finally, we should say that this is an unclassified report open to anyone and everyone, and this is intentional. CSE also produces reports for the Government of Canada decision makers at the classified level, which goes in a bit more detail. We are wide awake to the cyber threats facing Canada's democratic process, and we want you to be too, as well as all Canadians. Our democracy will be as strong as we make it, and every single one of us has a part to play. Merci de votre attention et sur ce, passons à la période des questions. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, merci. Nous pouvons maintenant répondre à vos questions. To give everyone a chance to participate, please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. Please raise your hand using the reaction button. We will go in order of hands raised. When it is your turn, please unmute your microphone, and then when you're finished speaking, remember to mute it again. Une fois que nous aurons répondu aux questions des participants virtuels, nous passerons aux lignes téléphoniques pour répondre aux questions restantes. Veuillez à couper et rétablir le son de votre microphone si nécessaire. Ryan Tumulty, National Post.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for taking our questions. I wanted to start with the discussion in the paper about elections infrastructure. You talk about the hacks and targets you've seen of elections infrastructure. I'm wondering, given our overall reliance, our large reliance on paper ballots, if that makes Canada slightly more immune to that, or if there is still a significant danger there.
Thank you for your question, Ryan. So as the report highlights, indeed, we're really focused on cyber threats to critical infrastructure of elections processes. And so, yes, for Canada, having a paper-based process, especially at the federal election level, that is a helpful element. But no matter which way in which an electoral process takes place, whether it is more digital, which is where many electoral processes are headed, it is just important to ensure that mitigations are in place to be able to ensure that you're going to be able to confirm the results of the outcomes of the election. So what thing that we encourage is to ensure that there's a paper trail, or if you're using a digital mechanism, that it is going to be able to be audited, if you want, for lack of a better word, to be able to describe clearly what the outcomes are of what it is that you've collected in terms of information. So ultimately, it really does come down to ensuring that people take into consideration all the threats that could play in the various types of elections that occur.
Okay, thank you for that. And just as a follow-up, you also mentioned you identify China and Russia as significant actors in this space, and you identify that they are likely to target countries with whom they have a hostile relationship. We have a hostile relationship with China and Russia at the moment, plus probably India as well. Are we expecting a bigger challenge in the 2025 election, assuming that is when it comes?
So one of the things that we highlight in the report is that we do expect that in the upcoming election, we can expect to see possibly more cyber threat activities targeted towards Canada. As Canada continues to play the role it does on the world stage, we have already witnessed and seen that potentially could make it that we have more cyber threat activities targeted towards us. And a good example of that is when we had, for example, President Zelensky come in for a visit. At that time, we saw we put out a threat, an alert to be able to ensure people were made aware of the possibility that we could see an increased level of cyber threat activities. And so in line with that, that's exactly what we're saying, is that the possibility is that as Canada continues to play the role that it does on the world stage, and where there could be differences of views and opinions, it is very possible that Canada will see an increase in possible threat activities towards it.
Kat Tunney.
Hello there. I'm wondering if CS on the issue of deep fakes and AI, has CSE observed deep fakes targeting Canadian politicians and I guess other political players? And if so, can you kind of maybe walk me through what you can do legally in that situation? Like, have you had to take down deep fakes already, for example, in Canada? Just looking for some examples on that.
Sure, I can kick it off here. So in terms of deep fakes and other AI or generative AI type elements, the big worry here is that the usage of generative AI is really makes things much more believable by humans, whether it's audio, video, or text, right? So what better way to reinforce a false narrative than with a video that looks like the real thing? So in the cases of, observing these things from happening, we have different online mechanisms that actually look for these sources. We have the rapid response mechanism within government, but the Cyber Center can always be contacted for any of these events to happen. And should it be found to be a misrepresentation, then we can work with the service providers to make sure that false content is addressed.
And again, this is not my follow-up. But if you have seen examples in Canada, especially involving politicians, would love that. But I guess my second question is, kind of troubled by the paragraph that talks about the inability to kind of stay on top of the sheer volume, and that during an election that it sounds like there will likely be cases that can't take down, and therefore voters may be led astray. So I guess it's this report and the timing of it. Is this a plea to the federal government for more support, more regulation? I guess, is there anything that we can be doing, or you guys in the federal government could be doing to stay on top of it, whenever the next election happens?
So thanks for the question, Catherine. So at the end of the day, we put out a report on threats to democratic processes since 2017, and we've been doing it for almost every couple of years. So that is where we are in the cycle. So the last one was in 2021, and here we are in 2023, and wanting to ensure that, with anticipation that the upcoming election will be launched in 2025, this is the right time to ensure that all those that will be involved in electoral processes are made aware. But it's totally in line with what we've been doing and advising over the many years that we've started doing this. And so with that, that is really the motivation. And to the point of your question, we want to ensure that as many people are aware with what the threats are that could be coming at them. And there's a big part of that is education. And this report is just another element to add to the educational piece so that people can be aware of the various threats. This is supported, of course, by all the other publications we put out, such as the National Cyber Threat Assessment that we put out in 2022, which really gives an overview of many other threats beyond that you might see during electoral processes.
Yeah, maybe I'll add just a little bit to that as well. I mean, the education and information that we share is critically important, right? So in cybersecurity, we always say that no cyber system is perfect, so you have to build cyber resilience and layers of defense. And it's the same thing with people and misinformation and understanding that these technologies and threats are out there. So we're continuing to push out the education, and really in the hope to educate Canadians and build cognitive resilience in the same way we try to build cyber resilience. So, we'll keep pushing out the information, and Canadians are going to have to be, very selective and scrutinizing of the information they feed, and hopefully use the information that we're providing as well as an education. Thanks.
Thanks. Sandrine, you can go ahead.
Oui, bonjour, merci pour la présentation. On apprend dans le rapport que la proportion des processus électoraux ciblés par des cybermenaces est passée de 10% en 2015 à 26% en 2022. De ma compréhension, ça, c'est vraiment les incidents dans le monde. Mais est-ce que vous avez des données ou des nouvelles données spécifiques aux incidents qui surviennent au Canada?
Donc, les données qui ont été utilisées pour faire l'analyse, c'est exactement ça. C'est des données qui sont globales. Donc, c'est sûr dans le rapport, on fait l'effort de s'assurer que les Canadiens comprennent c'est quoi l'impact sur nous et quelles sont les tendances qu'on veut apporter à leur attention. Mais l'effet qu'on utilise pour faire le rapport, c'est d'effet global. Parce qu'à la fin, on reconnaît que le Canada n'est pas immune, mais on apprend bien des choses sur ce qui se passe à travers le monde, surtout dans les processus démocratiques et électoraux.
Mais donc, on n'a pas de données sur le Canada spécifiquement. C'est ce que je comprends?
Merci. Ce que je peux ajouter, c'est que on travaille de façon très proche avec Élections Canada. Et donc dans la dernière élection fédérale de 2021, on n'a pas détecté aucune activité concernante à ce niveau-là. Et donc, on n'a pas des données à ce moment-là pour partager, mais les données dans le rapport sont des données de nature globale, comme globale à travers le monde.
Mm-hmm. D'accord, merci. Et juste pour la relance, j'aimerais juste avoir une idée d'où se situe le Canada par rapport à d'autres pays en ce moment. Parce que on peut lire que pour un paquet de raisons, le Canada est une cible de choix pour des cybermenaces dans le futur. Mais est-ce qu'on a fait l'exercice de se comparer avec, disons, d'autres pays démocratiques? Est-ce qu'on sait si on est parmi les plus à risque, parmi les moins à risque? Bref, juste avoir peut-être une idée d'où est-ce qu'on se situe.
Je vais te demander si mes collègues ont quelque chose d'autre à ajouter, mais je dirais que comme je l'ai dit dans mes commentaires d'ouverture, c'est sûr que on se voit pas comme le pays le plus visé parce qu'il y en a d'autres pays qui sont beaucoup plus impliqués, comme exemple dans leur soutien de l'Ukraine. Nous faisons partie de NATO, donc à cause de ça, on sait qu'on peut être une cible importante, puis surtout quand on fait des annonces qui sont peut-être au niveau international. Ceci dit, on voit définitivement que la Grande-Bretagne ainsi que les États-Unis sont beaucoup plus ciblés que nous. Mais écoutez, ça peut toujours évoluer, puis ça dépend qu'est-ce qui se passe au moment où les élections auront lieu ou bien qu'est-ce qui se passe dans le monde au moment qu'on fait l'analyse. Donc, dans les derniers 2 ans, c'est ce qu'on a déterminé, qu'on est quand même pas un pays qui est le plus ciblé. Ceci dit, on veut s'assurer que le monde sont très bien sensibilisés qu'on n'est pas immune aux menaces, ce qui est vraiment le but du rapport.
Merci.
Apologies, Rafi, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure, thanks for that. I take it that you're putting out these reports that are, warning Canadians and telling them to take this this issue seriously, but at the same time, you're not providing specific examples of this happening in Canada. 2 of my colleagues have asked you, and you have not provided examples. So, do you worry that people are just not going to take this seriously if you're not giving us concrete data, concrete names of politicians that this has been done to? Why can't you be more transparent about this?
The intent here is not that we're hiding anything. It truly is because there was a global data set that was taken into consideration as part of the analysis. So I don't want to make up something that doesn't exist in that way. But having said that, I'm hopeful that Canadians and industries and those that will be potentially taking part in future elections will take this report seriously, as they have the others that we've provided, especially because this goes along with other elements, especially as we get closer to the elections, like additional guidance for campaigners, guidance for voters, guidance for those who plan to run as candidates, in addition to the fact that we hold sessions with the political parties. So as you know, as a member of the site team, the role we play in terms of ensuring and mitigating risk with regards to foreign interference or anything of that nature related to electoral process is something we take very seriously, and hopefully this is seen as a heads up that things are evolving in the landscape that we're assessing. But at this point, we know that we don't have anything to say that Canada itself has had something different than what we've shared in this report at this time.
Okay, thanks. And as a follow-up, you're admitting yourselves that it's very hard to detect some of these deepfakes, and you guys are the experts at it. So what tips, if any, do you have for the public about spotting deepfakes when they see them in their day-to-day lives?
Thanks, Rafi, for the question. So obviously, we are concerned about deep fakes, as Rajiv pointed out, in multiple forms. So we have put out a number of publications to bring awareness to the threat, or to bring awareness to the challenges in deepfake, and also we are working with big tech on ensuring sort of guidelines on building safer AI engines. But the idea is always to be sort of mindful and suspicious of the news that's out there, and if there is any concern, to bring it to the attention of the authorities. It is true that video or deepfakes are getting more sophisticated, but we have to always be on our guards in ensuring that they don't convey the wrong message.
We'll go to iPhone 108.
Hi, Steve Chase here, Globe and Mail. I thank you for this report. I just wanted to follow up on a question my colleagues have been raising, and that is, when we write stories, we need to provide people examples of why it's a real threat and not just a theoretical threat. And I find this a consistent trend in your reporting, your public reporting, is you talk about what might happen, but you never tell us what did happen. For instance, when there was the leak about that attack on national gas infrastructure, you were mum. What is it about your mandate or authority that prevents you from telling us, to providing actual details on incidents?
So our focus is with working with the critical infrastructure industries and the various sectors out there to ensure that they continue to ramp up from a resilience perspective and really protect themselves from these cyber threats. We work very closely with them and in a partnership with them to be able to continue to educate them, and more importantly, be a partner with any type of advice we can, as well as ongoing sharing of information that we come to know through the various incidences that we monitor, both through Government Canada and the partnerships we have with international partners. Our role is really to focus on assisting them. We don't, because of the relationship we are building with the sectors, it is our role to continue to do that in the best way we can so that they can trust us. And so if there is something that has happened and we are able to share it in a global sense, we do that. So, when, we had threats to that we were concerned about with regards to the oil and gas sector, we put out a publication related to the oil and gas sector. So even though we may not specifically speak to an incident, we do speak to what we see as trends or things that are worrisome. And that's why we put out alerts, cyber flashes, advisories, publications. This is what our role is to ensure that we're building resilience across the country, across the various critical infrastructure sectors. And that's the purpose of the cyber.gc.ca website that really focuses on various types of audiences, because we do target, we do have an audience that is beyond just the critical infrastructure.
Okay, a follow-up question. I would say, of course, that nothing galvanizes public attention like actual examples with specifics, but that's not my question. My question is, given what you say about the difficulties of dealing with these cyber threats, are we ready to properly cope with this kind of election interference if an election were held tomorrow?
We're definitely ready. I mean, at the end of the day, as mentioned in my remarks, the need to ensure that we are resilient and that we're cyber protected ready is everybody's job. Our job is to ensure that we are protecting, government systems, because that's part of our mandate, for example, but then working, as I said, with all the various sectors that we know are possible vulnerabilities or are possibly cyber attack targets. And we are doing that. We do that very regularly. We have regular interactions with our partners, but they recognize that they have a role to play in this getting ready part as well. So that is part of the work we do, is in these conversations and in the provision of tools and advice and mitigations to be able to kind of continue to build that resilience. The other thing I would add is, because of the work we do as part of the site task force, along with colleagues at CSIS, RCMP, Global Affairs Canada, we each work within our respective lanes to be able to do our part to continue to protect against electoral interference, for example. And so that has continued to exist. That is, we play an active role in that, and we played that role, for example, even in the by-elections that took place over this past year. So it's not only at election time that we're up and running. We are definitely ready. We're just putting this out for those to be more aware that as they're starting to think about the next election that may come, the next federal election that may come, that they're also getting ready.
If I can add, so we don't, so we try to stay on top of the threat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and update our defenses of the government with the latest information we have on threats. More specifically, with Election Canada, as the chief pointed out, we don't wait for an election to be called. We are working very closely with Election Canada. And as the election is called, our tempo of activity or our tempo of engagement goes up. But we are very well joined up with Election Canada on ensuring that the federal electoral infrastructure is safe and safeguarded all the way up to election night.
Yeah, maybe just to weigh in and appreciate the question, and maybe just to clarify, you're looking for examples. So, within our document, we do show an example of deepfake videos in relation to the US, so we know they exist, and we've seen, many examples of these. When you dive into Canadian elections, so you take our data set, you narrow it to Canadian elections, which was some of the questions, and looked for, any of these kind of cyber-enabled incidents that would have impacted an election, it's 0, right? So that number is 0, and I think that's important to note. But what we are worried about is looking at the deepfake and then the opportunities for generative AI that we have seen examples of around the world. We point some out in our document with respect to the US. This is something that we're predicting will happen in the next election because of the availability of generative AI and the idea that this is something for us to be concerned about and mindful of and educate ourselves on the possibility of this happening. So it's irrespective of which politician might be mimicked or have a deepfake video out. It's really the threat is like constant across any of the political parties. We have to educate the political parties. We have to educate voters. We have to educate just the Canadian population, understand that this is out there. This is something we have to be mindful of. Yes, technology is evolving to try to keep pace with being able to detect these things, but we have to educate ourselves as well and make sure that we're mindful of this. Thanks.
Alex?
Good morning, and thank you for taking my questions. So first off, I'd like to ask, so though the report makes note of Russia and China in conducting cyber attacks on Canada, I'm curious as to the CSE's ongoing threat assessment of threats posed by regimes like Iran upon our sovereignty. Given that other federal departments are currently investigating the admissibility of alleged Iranian regime agents residing in Canada, has the CSE identified Iran as a potential threat in subsequent elections?
So thank you for your question. So one of the comments I made, I think in answering another question, is the fact that in 2022, we put out a national cyber threat assessment. And in that national cyber threat assessment, we name a few actors that we consider having potential interests in cyber threat activity in Canada. And Iran is one of those that was named there. So we don't name them specifically in this report because those that we've seen over the last 2 years that have been mostly attributed to cyber threat activity has been China and Russia, as identified in my opening remarks and as per the report. But we have identified Iran in the National Cyber Threat Assessment of 2022, which is again demonstrating what could be something to continue to keep monitoring.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, in the CSE report released in June, it makes note of intimidation tactics typically used by authoritarian regimes, including those by China, where they operated secret police stations across the country. Now, the RCMP has yet to announce any arrests regarding at least 7 secret police stations in the country. But can CSE comment on any of the potential concerns regarding cybersecurity threats that some of these stations pose?
No, I would recommend that your question be redirected to the RCMP for the reasons that they are the ones that are lead on the investigation. We are not an investigative organization in that nature. Our focus very much is on the cybersecurity threat, as per what we are sharing with you this morning. And as a result, as we outlined, what we are seeing is that, China remains a cyber threat actor that we continue to be concerned about and doing our part to ensure that that awareness is well known.
Kat, I just wonder if that's a legacy hand or if you had another question.
Jen, can you come check this out because this is plugged in that multi. But I can't.
Sorry, legacy hand, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Steve, is that a legacy hand on your end as well, or do you have another follow-up?
I have a follow-up about page 10 of the report. Oh, geez, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
On page 10, you have a graphic in which you show, I think what you show is network or scanning of networks at election authorities in Canada. So can you give us the actual numbers for this instead of just the proportions? It appears to show that in 2022, Russia and China sort of almost each were responsible for half of this network intrusions or network scanning at, I'm assuming, Elections Canada. Can you give us the actual numbers and details of this chart for at least for the last 3 years?
Steve, is this a chart that, just to make sure, this is the bar chart from 2015 to 2022?
Yes, that's correct.
So this is meant to show the attribution of cyber threats during national elections. This is not in Canada. This is from the global data set that we have, and goes back to the chief's opening comment that Russia is about 9%. So the red bar is 9, and China is the kind of bluish one, 6%. They add up to 15%, and the balance being 85 being unattributed.
Okay, I understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Is that it for you for follow-ups?
Yes, correct.
We have time for one more question. Okay, if that's it for now, thank you everyone for joining us. And if you have any follow-up questions, please get in touch. Thank you. Have a good day.